Welcome to Good Morning Hospitality, your one-stop shop for the latest news, noteworthy trends, and thought-provoking discussions across the industry. From hotels and short-term rentals to all things travel and hospitality, you'll find each episode equips you with the information you need to start your week. Join us on Good Morning Hospitality every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning, Leo. Happy 2025.
Happy 2025 to you. My friend, I kind of know a little bit about what you've been up to, but it's very exciting to see you again. It feels like the start of a new school term.
I know it does. It's exciting, except you already have friends, you know? It's like,
yeah, you
not
got
a new
through that
school, just a new term.
Yeah, you got through that painful first term where you didn't know anyone. Now you've got a crew, and I'm in your crew. Isn't that cool? It's exciting, isn't it?
I love it. It's exciting, yeah.
Like we both decided that we were going to have a proper holiday, not do very much work, and then some pretty significant things happened in the short-term rental space. So we were obviously texting, and clearly we were texting a little bit over Christmas, and we'll go into why a bit later. But tell us a little bit about your cold weather trip to Scotland.
Oh, man. Well, I immediately got sick. Classic. I really did. Yeah, I got like a terrible case of sinusitis, and so was like trying to get whatever I could over the counter. It seems almost gone now. Let's see, but I mean, I've been with it for 2 weeks now, so we'll see. But other than that, it was really good. I feel like, even though I kind of mentally can try and prepare myself for what life is like not in Barcelona, it still hits me hard. We did not see the sun for 2 weeks. It was, I don't know. So we went to Lisbon first. We had a concert on the Saturday. My mom always laughs when I call it a concert. She's like, it's a DJ set. It's not a concert. But whatever. We went to see one of our favorite DJs, Boris Brecha, and it was amazing. And so went there and we were able to flout around Lisbon for an extra day or two after the weekend. And then headed off to Edinburgh, where it was actually not as cold as I was expecting, huh? Like, I think it was like 8 or 9 degrees most of the days. It like barely rained. I don't know. It was very strange. So not at all the terrible, frigid winter that we were anticipating going to. We did get darkness and no sunshine. So it was definitely an experience.
And what did you eat? Did you have Christmas turkey? Did you do all that stuff?
Oh, yeah. Christmas Day was a bit of a disaster, as we knew it was going to be, because as soon as we booked our holiday, I started looking for places to book for Christmas Day and Boxing Day, and it was impossible. Like, we couldn't even find like a good place for like an Indian curry, which I was actually excited about. I was like, this is going to be great. Like, go have a nice curry on Christmas Day. No, we ended up in the morning, we did find a place that was open for breakfast, and so we had smoked salmon, which is a classic. And then in the evening, we ended up really tired. I was still pretty sick. And so we ordered a Chinese takeaway to the hotel room and watched Squid Game.
Merry Christmas. I mean, that's not bad, actually. I wouldn't call that a total disaster. I like that.
It was awesome.
Maybe I'm fantasizing because I have 2 children running around and I couldn't have that Christmas Day right now. But that sounds great. Well done, you.
Yeah, it was not bad. We had a tour on the Christmas Day. We had a tour of Edinburgh, which was actually really nice. We had a lovely Venezuelan tour guide. He was really good, full of all kinds of stories and stuff. So we did get out and do things. And then, Chinese takeaway and complete with fortune cookies, which is the best part of a Chinese takeaway, as we all know.
Come on, you're living the dream.
No complaint. I know. What about you, Leo? Tell me all about the kiddos.
Well, just to say quickly as well, I got a very cute picture from you guys in Edinburgh, which I really enjoyed. While I was sending you a picture of me in nothing but a pair of swimming shorts and a hat, running into the sea on Christmas Day with everybody else. I'm not going to call what I did swimming, but it definitely was, skin and water met one another very quickly, and then I ran out again. But yeah, there was probably, 2,000 people on the beach in Brighton, running in, Christmas hats. You could smell the sort of champagne in the air. There was merriment, there was festive wonderment in the air. It was fantastic. And Sadie, my older kid found it really funny. She really enjoyed it. The weather held. And crucially this year for us, no one got sick. Because last year we all went around with the flu and the cold, and I didn't even eat Christmas dinner last year. So we managed to keep everybody fit and healthy. We managed to eat our Christmas dinner, and we got through the whole thing with no arguments or tantrums. So I would say it was a real home run for us this year, I would say. And then obviously we just gone through New Year's Eve, where I went to bed at 10 p.m. Only to be woken up by the fireworks at midnight. And I thought, well, why didn't I just stay up if you're going to wake me up anyway? But yeah, there you go. That's the time of life I'm at.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think our flight landed at like 10 p.m. on New Year's Eve, getting back to Barcelona. And I have a fabulous view of Montjuic, which is where they do the big fireworks to ring in the new year, from my terrace. And so we were in the kitchen and I heard the first firework go, and it was like, grab the champagne, we're late. We're running out to the terrace to watch the fireworks, but it was amazing.
Lovely.
That's my favorite part about my flat, I think, is being able to watch fireworks from there without having to be out with all the crowds of drunk people.
That's VIP. That's it. That's exclusive living. Well done, you. So here we are. We've a new year, new start. We won't do resolutions. Maybe we'll talk about those next week. I always think you still need a bit longer to work out your resolutions and all that good stuff. Hospitality highlight. I'm gonna jump in here, Sarah, because you've been traveling more than me, and I don't know if you've got one, but on the 16th of December, I don't know how we missed this, by the way. I don't know how we missed this, but it's exciting nonetheless. On the 16th of December, the first high-speed daytime train left Paris, Gare de l'Est, and arrived left Gare de l'Est at 9:55 a.m. and arrived in Berlin at 6 p.m. There's an 8-hour rapid-fire quick train between Paris and Berlin. And I just think that is the coolest news ever, because what that really means is you can now go from London to Berlin with one change in 10 hours. I mean, how cool is that?
I'm now looking up on Google Maps because I want to know how long it took before. I have no idea how long it took before.
Yeah, I think we're talking a good sort of 13 hours, and there was no daytime service. There was no quick daytime service. So you can now go city centre to city centre in 8 hours. I know you're not much of an intercity train person, I think, because of the price, and it's never really caught you. But I think a lot of the legislation we're seeing around short flights in Europe that's developing, and in France they've actually gone really aggressively on this. Shorter than an hour, for example, are being stopped. We're going to see the advantage being given to the train companies to start driving innovation like this, and I'm super excited to see it because a lot of our American cousins come over, they tour around for a couple of weeks, and the internal flight is something that I hate. It. If it can be avoided, we should avoid it. And yeah, so I think it's cool. 8 hours, London to Paris. Sorry, Paris to Berlin, door to door. What do you think?
It's cool, but it needs to be like Barcelona to Madrid difference if it's going to work. So the reason I say this, and this is one of, I think, the biggest pieces of innovation, I actually prefer, if I'm going to Madrid, I always take the train. I never fly. And I'm usually a fly kind of gal, and I don't really care so much about the environment. We'll just
and she admits it. And
here we go. But I do it because it's more convenient. And so my healthy dose of cynicism is, until or unless it's more convenient and quicker than flying, it will not be done. Why is Barcelona to Madrid quicker than flying? Because it's from the city center to the city center. It's on a train. It takes 2 hours and a half, 2 hours, 45 minutes max. If it's late, they reimburse you. And you don't have to do all the changeovers. The security is a lot easier. So I reckon, like, all in, it takes you 3 hours because you don't have to pass the security check more than maybe like 15 minutes before you get on the train. You turn up. You don't have a limit on your bags. You can take a big suitcase. You don't have to pay extra, all these kind of things. It is more convenient. You get there faster, and it's an easier journey. It's more comfortable. The train is fabulous. They have Wi-Fi. You can work. It's awesome. So I think that for me is the gold standard. I think by car normally, like door to door, it would be 6 hours. By a bus, it's 8 hours from Barcelona to Madrid. And the train is 2:45 max. So I think that for me is the sweet spot. So I don't know if that's possible without people getting like whiplash to make something that fast. I think it's a really good initiative. I think especially in Europe, where a lot of the infrastructure already exists, to have trains, especially between some of the major cities, I think it's good. And if we can start shifting some of the funding that's being put out by the European Union to make those things happen, I think it's wonderful. I'll just leave you with my healthy dose of cynicism that it needs to be shorter and more convenient. So I think still for me, 8 hours is like,
your healthy dose of cynicism is always welcome, because I'm such an enthusiast for this. So it's good to temper it. And I think you're right. Let's dig into what you said there. The Wi-Fi, so you can work. And ideally, these days, if you get a comfortable seat on a train, it's just the same as working at home, right? Apart from you can't do video. You could, but that's a bit obnoxious. The other thing, the city centre to city centre factor. So you cut out all of that taxi, transit, lifting your bag off the carrier time to get into the city, which we know in European cities, less so in America, I think, where the airports are a bit closer to the centre. But in European cities, the airports are often 60, 70 miles away. They can be. London's a nightmare. Depending on which airport you land in, you can be miles away. So there's that. And the fact that you haven't got to go to the airport 2 hours ahead of time, right? And have your whole getting to your airport, flying and then flying, and it adds up. So I think I just slightly counter what you said around it being too long, because that is a particularly long route, right? Paris to Berlin is a particularly long route, where I think it is a good, because it will demonstrate the demand and let people get used to the idea of it, and then the shorter routes that can come in around it. So that, I think, is always going to be a really long stretch of travel. But if you can start to get a direct between different European cities, I like the idea that it's two capital cities being linked. I'd love one if we could get Paris to Rome, and if we could do Rome to Rome to Madrid, and Barcelona, and start to put it around those lines. Then you actually are providing ones that might be 3 or 4 hours, less 8 hours, and we can actually get people moving around on trains. So I think it's a really good start, and I'm not surprised it's a German company that's rolled with it, a German and French innovation that's rolled with it, because they are the leaders really in high-speed rail in Europe. So it's cool. It's exciting. Let's move on. We tried to down tools. We were going off on our Christmas holidays. You were actually probably in the air when I did this, but we got the very, very interesting news just before Christmas that Hostaway have raised $365 million and a valuation of $925 million to go to, let's say, go alongside or to complement the $170 million they raised in 2023. This round led by General Atlantic, so very good pedigree in the short-term rental space, and an interesting move. We had a hot take interview. Did you get to listen? You probably did, didn't you? You probably plugged me in while you were on your holidays.
I did. I loved it. First of all, I love any kind of interview with Marcus. I just find him so authentic and so unique that any interview with him always gets my attention. I think it's really exciting for them as well. And also for our industry as a whole. I think sometimes it's really easy to think that a lot of this funding is only coming from what in my mind are the big guys, right? Like Sonder, Picasa. That they're the only ones that have enough kind of clout to get this type of funding or make these kind of partnerships. And so for me, it was exciting that a company that obviously Hostaway's been around for a while and they definitely have grown. But at least in my mind, they're more, and maybe this is just my perception because I see them at conferences and stuff, but they're more accessible. They're more like me. They're more like us than they are like a Picasa or a Sonder, which I know has tons of additional backing. And so I think for me, it was a really lovely Christmas story. It would give me a lot of hope for our industry. And kind of that even some of what I would consider the little to medium guys can really make it. And that there are people out there that have a lot of money that see the future of our industry and they're investing in it. And I think sometimes it's really easy for us to get wrapped up in a lot of the negative news about regulation and about all these other things. And so it's good to see money behind the industry from people that are a lot smarter than you or I, even though we're pretty smart. So these guys are basically geniuses that are putting money in. So that was kind of my, 10,000 foot view.
That they're smarter than us all. They're just more willing to gamble. Who knows what the answer to that one is? No, I agree. It's always good to follow the money. It's always, and when you see the money coming in, you think, well, people are looking at our space in positive terms, and I think it means that we'll see more of it in the next coming months in terms of investment into the space, and also then some of that capital being spent on acquiring businesses. So we're going to see, undoubtedly, we're going to see more movement around businesses taking other businesses and market share and growing, diversifying offering through buying it as well as building it. And that's what's really interesting about this deal is clearly the war chest, and Marcus described it as a war chest, is to do both things, right? It's to grow their customer base in different markets. So hiring people that can speak those languages, building more tech, investing in AI, but also acquiring businesses. And that, generally speaking, is a really interesting place to be. I agree. Congratulations to Hostaway, because they've got a really smart team. I agree with what you're saying. We see them at conferences, and you meet with their team, and they don't have like they don't throw like a ton of money at marketing, and they don't have like, a ton of people walking around handing out, whatever it might be, croissants and cookies and things. But they have a really, really smart group of people that know and understand what their customers need, because they are very customer focused. And that's what's very, very cool, is we're seeing a company in our space that, again, we all speak to hosts every day, different hosts around the world. And whenever you speak about Hostaway, they talk about how good the product is. And, that's true of a number of PMSs in the space, clearly, but they are one of those PMSs that are doing it really well. And so it's great to see, as you say, people who are trying to do the right thing, come from within the industry, having success, and other people seeing the value in what they're doing. Question for you, Sarah, is what do you think happens next? Does this set a chain of events in process? Have you got any? What do you think 2025 might look like when it comes to more investment and acquisitions, etc.?
I don't know. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that it means a lot more for the smaller guys. So I don't know. I don't know if I have a prediction, but I have hopes. I think that, kind of in line with what was so exciting for me about this this fundraise was, I think for so long all we hear about are Guesty buys somebody else, or Guesty gets tons, multiple millions more, or Vacasa, or Sonder, or Marriott. It's always the big names. It's always the big dogs. And I don't know. I like things for underdogs. I would almost be more content in 2025 if we had 30 different announcements of much smaller raises they're going to impact smaller businesses. I think that for me is where most of the innovation in our industry is. I think that's where the excitement is. And so that is my hope for 2025. That and maybe that looks like, I don't know, some kind of fund who comes in and says, okay, we really believe in this industry as a whole. And so we're going to put our money in, 15 different companies across the industry that do a variety of things because we really believe in this. So I don't know, anybody out there with funding, if you're listening, just a crazy idea that I have. But I think for me, that would be what I would get most excited about, because I genuinely think that's what's going to drive the most innovation in our industry, especially in the technology space, but also in the management space. I think that there's so much still to be done in terms of banding together and being able to overcome some of the regulations that have been put in place and find solutions. I just keep thinking about the key thing in Italy. I mean, it just drives me up the wall. There's so many good solutions out there that don't mean that you have to completely ban something. And so I think the more that we have invested in these kind of technologies and the more that we can spread some of that wealth, I think the better off our industry is going to be. So that's my hope for 2025. What about you, Leo? You want to put your hat in the ring on a prediction?
I like that. I like that. I like the way you're calling it a hope, because I would also say I'm an optimist about our industry. So it's always coming from the prism of like hoping that we have a steady recovery in Europe around inflation, and then growth comes and people start traveling more, which I think they will. I think it's 2025 generally is going to be a stronger year for tourism and travel than 2024, and hence why we always talk about you need to have a pragmatic approach to how you bring travelers into your area of Europe to make sure that you feel the economic benefit. Back to the space, though, I agree with you. I guess I think that fund that you speak of that sees the potential in some of these innovative companies could potentially be the bigger players that are now have now managed to raise far more capital than a lot of competitors, potentially seeing the opportunity to go, great, that's a skill set we need, let's buy it. So we buy a company because we think that the founders and the people in it are coming up with great ideas. We need their experience in our room, or the product is great and we want to bring that in as well. And we haven't seen an awful lot of that in the last 12 months. So I agree. I think that could be a predict, hope, whatever you want to say, that might be something we start to see now that the wheels are in motion. On that, I thought we'd hit it. I thought we'd seen the end of 2024. And then right at the end of the year, we got the news that Casago has acquired Vacasa for $128 million. Now, we're not going to go into this too much because we are the EU, but we are Europe, but there's clearly implications for Europe here, and we'll go into that as well. Michael and Will got together on New Year's Eve and did a fantastic sort of deep dive on this, exclusively on this, for 15 minutes. Which I found really interesting as I was, getting ready for my who am I kidding? I didn't have a New Year's Eve party. I stayed in with the kids, but that was my New Year's treat as I was cracking my one beer that I had that evening. They're also having there'll be the first interview with Steve Schwab as soon as he's allowed to talk about the deal, and they obviously deep dive the subject in the regular show on a Monday. So we won't go into it too much. Listen to the content there, but clearly it's interesting. And anyone who's listening who doesn't listen to the US version, just listens to the European version, let me say this obviously has implications globally because these are such two powerhouse businesses. So Casago manage through the franchise model, which is the focus on hyper local, right? Local companies, self-managing, looking after their own P&Ls, being their own version of things, and essentially driving growth locally, which Sarah, you and I talk about the entire time as being a really smart way to scale. So some validation perhaps for the hyper local, which I'm going to get put on a t-shirt for us because we do seem to talk about it a lot. Vacasa, 41,000 homes across the US, Belize, Canada, Costa Rica, Mexico. Struggling business, so since the highs of going public has really, really struggled. And so it looks like Casago are going to take them private for, far less than their share price high that they started with. So, you've got one of the driving powerhouses originally of our industry, Vacasa, who've slightly gone missing, slightly lost their way. A lot of us have thought for a while that the franchise model is potentially the model to use to get scale. And now we're going to, the proof of the pudding's in the eating, as they say. So we now have a chance to see how that plays out. Undoubtedly, there is going to be a ton of challenges trying to put these two businesses together and potentially see about turning it into a franchise business. Clearly, the one way that they could sort of help make Vacasa more profitable is raise revenue by selling off the franchises. Like that's obviously the first thing that could be done. But we don't know the inner workings of what's happening there. All we know is a great team are being assembled. We think the franchise model is going to be the one they run with. So there's going to be some revenue generation from bringing out that franchise system and then potentially turning these markets more into growth markets again, because you've got a local team driving it, in charge of their own P&L, making their own profit on it. I've said a lot. I was trying to say not too much, but Sarah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. And I think the other piece that caught my eye was obviously the involvement of Roofstock. So Roofstock for quite a while has been a platform that's really well known as like you can purchase a property without ever seeing it. So they tell you this is a property, this is what it could rent for, and you can buy that online in a click of 3 buttons, which I think in Europe would be way more complicated because of course you have to go and have 50 pages of some document read to you by a notary and they charge you $1,000 an hour. But in the States, it's really easy. And so I think this is also an interesting opportunity in terms of new supply acquisition of properties, or maybe even of being able to kind of shift some of the properties in the portfolio and provide additional value to the owner. So that was, I think, for me, the piece that most caught my eye. I also believe they're probably going to go for that sort of franchise model. And I think it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. I know some in the industry that have a franchise model and it works brilliantly. But I think for me, the franchise model is all about what you're providing at the corporate level. How much value are you actually providing in terms of training, in terms of brand awareness, in terms of all these other things? And I think Vacasa as a name and as a brand still has a lot to overcome in terms of some of that negative press around the brand awareness and around the performance. Because I think, as we've talked about multiple times on the podcast, they grew, in my opinion, too quickly, abandoned the hyper local. So I'm glad that is part of the new approach. Hopefully, is kind of getting back to basics and going back to that. But I am cautious. Anytime that there's such a big merger like this, my healthy dose of cynicism says, is it not more of the same? Are they not trying to grow too quickly? And so I think I'm really curious just to see how everything pans out and kind of what the strategy is. Also, we know that oftentimes in these kinds of mergers, I mean, it could take 12 months before we have anything tangible in terms of what the strategy is, in terms of how they're combining teams or not. And so I am cautiously optimistic, I would say, about what this means for the future of what was kind of, I guess, previously Vacasa. I mean, and also like what's going to happen with the brand. Is it going to be completely absorbed into Casago? Is Vacasa going to disappear? Is it going to be a branch? I don't know. I'm left almost with more questions than answers, I think, at this point. But I do think it's interesting, and I do think it's something we're going to continue to see, these kind of mergers in the industry, especially when you have a company like Vacasa that has been struggling for a while, and their shares dropped quite drastically from IPO. And so I think for Casago, it's a great way to kind of snatch up what was a booming business, and I still think has potential to be in the future if they kind of get back to basics. So
it's the bet, isn't it? And I agree with what you said. Cautious optimism is your mantra, isn't it? I would say it's the first time I think they've raised money. Casago, it's the first time they've raised money. They've been building the business for a long time. I feel like they will try and go initially quite quickly, in terms of sorting out what's going to be franchised and sold and things like that. I think that will happen quite quickly. Let's see. We'll watch. The reason why I think it's worth talking about here on the European pod is the fact that it's not been done, as far as I know, and I'll be corrected, but it's not been done that a franchise business that's got to a decent amount of listings has then gone, we think that the model we have for supply growth and sort of consistency, right, to make a customer stay with us is the model. We're going to test that by taking on a business that's ultimately sort of churning lots of its supply and not delighting its owners in the same way that we are. We're going to take on that inventory. And I just wonder if a European, UK-based franchise business will look at that same thing and think, I wonder if there's an opportunity for me. I wonder if there's a company that looks like it's lost its way. We're going to have we've had a very tough year. It's going to be hopefully a year of some growth, but it's going to be quite slow and steady growth. Could that be an acquisition we could make because we think our model is more profitable? Or could we raise some money, based on people watching what's happened over in the US and go, well, look, actually why don't we try and raise some money and go for the growth? Because clearly if you get the scale and you get it right, then wow, you could potentially be unstoppable. So I just wonder if there's people in parts of Europe that will be looking at how this plays out and just think, because Casago and Vacasa, are going to be very, very busy over there on the States. I don't think they're going to be looking at European expansion anytime soon. I also think it's culturally so different. I don't know if someone could roll up the whole thing, but I don't know what you think about that, Sarah.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think it definitely gives some food for thought for those that are in Europe. I still think that for me, the franchise model in Europe is a tricky one because of all the things that we've historically spoken about, right? The need for this super hyper local. I think it could work a lot more easily than a traditional like Vacasa expansion, which is all under one company and everything's done exactly the same in every single place. But that's also what worries me a little bit about the franchise model. So I think if a franchise model is going to work in Europe, properly, it's going to have to be flexible enough to allow for some of those hyperlocal differences, and homogenous enough to allow for a guest experience that is similar or the same to align the brand across all of the different markets. So I think if they get it right, if somebody in Europe were to get it right, it's extremely powerful, because think of all the times that like you've had a really positive experience with, let's say, an Airbnb that you've rented, and you are going to a different city and you might want to rent with the same people, but they just don't exist. And part of the reason is because it was so hyper local that that's what made it good. So if you have this franchise model and you're able to do it properly in Europe and maintain the quality and wow the guest, I think it could be really powerful. I just think the caution that I would give to anyone who wanted to do that is to give enough space for the hyperlocal differences. So I don't know exactly what the balance is, but for me, there's a very delicate balance between homogenous quality, whereas does not necessarily mean homogenous operation and homogenous rules for everything. And so I think that's where the sweet spot is in Europe. If somebody can find that, I definitely think that there is a lot to be said, as well as being able to overcome some of the regulatory things that we're facing in most of the major cities. Because when I think about where I might be more inclined to look for a similar management company, it's in similar types of destinations. So if it was a city destination, I would look maybe for the same management company and see if they have something. But if it was more of like a rural kind of holiday, I think, I don't know, there's going to have to be some brand linking done there really properly for it to work, I think. But big opportunity. Maybe you and I should get in the business, Theo. What do you
Come on,
think?
Sarah, it's time, isn't it? The next that's the natural evolution of our budding friendship, isn't it? No, I agree. We're also bleeding into that ongoing debate we always have about the difference between the US and Europe. You know, and again, I think I won't repeat what you've said, because I think you've completely hit the nail on the head. But it won't stop people trying, for sure, because where there's money, there's opportunity, and where there's opportunity, people will run to it. So I think we can definitely safely say we'll see some movement here. Interesting news to finish with. I always like to celebrate. I always like to finish with some positive news. We got a great article here from Paul Stevens, short-term rentals. STRs dominate 2024 New Year's Eve travel in Europe. Thank you, Paul, for this lovely piece to finish with. This actually came out last year, but you and I were just too busy. We're too busy on all the other bits we were doing. We missed it. But this is based on pricing data, booking data for Europe, that short-term rentals outpace hotels over the festive period. Now, I think you were in a hotel, weren't you? You in a hotel?
We were in a hotel. You were
a hotel. So STR price increase across these 25 markets. We'll put a link to this in the show notes, and I'll show you. There's an interesting presentation of the data here, but generally by 7.8% across most European cities, whereas the hotel prices only saw a modest increase of 2.7%. Key takeaways really are markets which have restricted short-term rentals. That's the only place that you're seeing surge pricing for hotels, which I think adds to the narrative that we talk about a lot, which is, you know, if you take away one element of the hospitality mix, you're going to sort of exclusively benefit the other area. So Bruges, we talked about Bruges a couple of times last year. They banned short-term rentals in the historic centre, or I think it was they banned additional licenses, perhaps. No, I think it was they banned it, didn't they?
I think it was something. Yeah.
Hotel prices surged by 21% in those markets, whereas areas with little to no regulation, additional regulation, it seems that the short-term rentals generally are outperforming hotels and growing as a vertical, which is what our data has shown us in different forms through the year, is that as a lodging type against hotels, we are still growing, or the short-term rental industry is still growing. And then interestingly, both STR and hotel prices dropped in Paris by decent amounts because of all the regulation that's landed in Paris. And I think probably it's a city that's exhausted from the very, very busy political and sporting year it's had. So maybe people thought, well, I've been to Paris already. I won't go back for Christmas if you lived in France and you've already been for the Olympics. So a couple of things at play there. But generally speaking, I think it's interesting because it continues to tell that story that, you know, we as an industry, the STR industry, we are directly competitive with hotels wherever we're pitched against them, and generally we are growing at a faster rate. So it'd be interesting to see how that looks coming into 2025. A bit of data to finish with. Sarah, have you got a view or have you got a counter punch for me?
No, I don't have a counter punch. I think for me, it boils down to what type of traveler as to which one I would choose. And in fact, for example, in Glasgow, I was just thinking, I said hotel, but it was an apart hotel. And so it was kind of a hybrid, I guess you could say. And that was nice, just to be able to like wake up and cook a meal or make breakfast, or I don't know, decide to stay in and have something more simple. I think especially if we were traveling in a group, when we went to Lisbon, it was an Airbnb. I think that also has an influence as to who you're traveling with. Whereas like if it's just me and my partner, a hotel room is probably fine. If it's just for a few nights, I'll order a Chinese takeaway. But I think for me, like the beauty of our industry and what we really provide is something feeling more like home, especially when it's the holidays and maybe you're farther away from home. And so I definitely felt more at home over the days that we were in, like even though it was an apart hotel, than I did in the normal hotel the first few days. So there is something to be said about just having that kitchen, having your own space where you can, just share something simple. Like, I don't know, we made like some pasta one of the nights. It wasn't super complicated. And I kind of wish that I would have had that on Christmas Day, maybe.
Well, Sarah, look, lovely to see you, my friend. I'm looking forward to having every week with you in 2025. What an exciting year we've got. We'll do resolutions next week. And then, because we're probably already have rolled through a few and broken a few. So it's good to give ourselves an extra week to settle on where we are. For you at home, if you've enjoyed the show, please hit like, share, subscribe in all the usual social places. Or if you're listening to podcast, please feel free to also leave a comment on the show too. And we'll look forward to seeing you again next week. Many thanks.